At this time, let's begin today's webinar, Begin 2020 Strong, 5 Steps to Set and Achieve Your Goals. It is my pleasure to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Tanya Cervoni, Senior Practice Leader with Canadian Management Center. Tanya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Welcome, everyone. As Jessica said, my name is Tanya Cervoni. I'm super excited to be here today. My background is in leadership development, training, and coaching, and I am moderating this conversation, and we have a great one in store for you. I am not by myself. I am joined by our guest speaker, our very own Nellie Vieira. Nellie is a facilitator with CMC, but beyond that, she's also an experienced professional speaker. She's a consultant, she's a coach, and she has an advanced expertise in negotiation skills. And in addition to many years in corporate management and having held many executive roles, if I was forced to sum Nellie up in one word, I would have to go with passionate. And this is going to come through loud and clear on today's webinar, she's super passionate about empowering other people to create results, to create success, things that they want to achieve in their life. So really, there's no one better to be talking about and with today than Nellie. Nellie, I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Now, before I hand the mic over to Nellie, I just have a couple quick reminders. Again, as Jessica said at the beginning, we want this to be a conversation. So please, on the right-hand side, feel free to chat with us. Send us your comments, your questions. If we have time to answer some as we go along, we will. Otherwise, we'll try to address some in the Q&A panel. And for those of you who are not familiar with Canadian Management Center, a special welcome to you. CMC is a national organization dedicated to prepare the next generation of leaders to thrive in tomorrow's marketplace. And we select our webinar topics based on feedback from participants like yourselves. So again, at the end of this session, you're going to have the opportunity to give us some feedback, to give us some idea of maybe some of the topics you'd like us to be talking about to help you to be more successful in the area of your life that you are focused on. Now, of course, this particular topic was additionally inspired because of the fact we find ourselves at the beginning of a new year, and this is the time when all of us take notice of what we've been up to, where we've been, what we want to achieve going forward. So we've got some great tips to help you get there. And we are on Twitter. Please feel free to follow us. Our handle is Canadian Management, and tweet any insights you get today using our hashtag CMC event. We do often get asked a few times, so we're going to mention it a couple times, that yes, this session is being recorded, and you will receive a copy of the recording after the session, and that will include the slides. And now I am going to pass things over to Nellie. Nellie, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Tanya. So here it is, another start to another year. And every year we may be saying to ourselves, okay, this is going to be the year. This is going to be it. And why we're here today is to take a look at why goal setting matters in making sure that, yes, this year these things I want for myself are really going to happen. Now, why goal setting matters is, first and foremost, it creates the focus. It allows you to see it clearly defined as an outcome. And this way, whatever it is you want to achieve, you've got the answer to the question, what? It ensures alignment. It helps you to maintain that focus, keeping your eye on the end game. This helps also to appreciate and to very much understand your why. It provides the measurement. It helps you envision the success and know that you actually got there with the specific actions to be checked off. This is your how. And right off the bat, you know, it's really interesting. I've got to mention that one of the things that we often try to do to ourselves is create that hope and wish list. And, you know, we have these conversations about how we can allow ourselves to dream about things. But setting goals really sets the reality in motion. So I want to ask right off the bat, if we were able to actually hear from you, sometimes there are situations that we might be getting into ourselves, yeah, I tried this last year, it didn't work. So my first question for you, and I'm going to put it right out there, is have you ever set a goal you didn't achieve? I'm letting you know. I'm going to ask you even, Tanya. Have you done that? I
Nothing.
knew you knew I was going to
put me on the spot right from the get-go. Yes. So you talked about a reality check. So those of you with us today, you should see a poll question appear in front of you. Simple yes or no. Have you set a goal you didn't achieve? And don't forget, though, to click the submit button. It's kind of hidden in the bottom right-hand corner. If you don't hit submit, we will not see your response. So, Jessica, if we could close out that poll, it was a pretty simple yes or no. And while we wait for those results to appear, I think, Nellie, you were putting me on the spot for me to fess up first.
Yeah.
Okay. I will have to say yes. And I would expand upon that, and I would say multiple times. And I'm really hoping that I'm not alone, because if I start to see a ton of people who say no on this webinar, I'm going to think one of two things. Either one, you're not pushing yourself far enough, or two, please stay with us at the end of the webinar so we can talk to you and figure out what you're doing right, because I'd like to tap into that. But, and here are the results. So 91% of you have said yes.
There you go.
You have set a goal that you didn't achieve, but there are 3% on the line that says that they've achieved every goal they ever set.
Oh, boy, we got to tap into those people. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I think, so this gives us some insight, but I think the rubber hits the road when we actually take a look at why. So we are going to follow up with another question, and the question is, so think about one of the goals that you didn't meet. And for some of you, it might only be one goal that you never met. Some might be multiple, but pick one and think about what got in the way. We gave you several options here. Was it too big and too difficult? Were there distractions? Procrastination, lack of support, too busy, lack of commitment, or was it something else? And if it was something else, please communicate with us in the chat panel. I do recognize it could be more than one of these, but you're going to have to just pick one for today. So don't forget to hit submit when you are done. So
it's fascinating. I look at the list myself, and I always skip over the too big and the too difficult, because I figure if I've imagined it, or if I think I want it, then it can't be too big and it can't be too difficult. But when I look at the distractions, oh my gosh, that's probably for me my number one. It's easy to either overschedule or push off what I want personally, because somehow there's something else that's always more important, or someone that's more important. And literally that number one for me of distractions can oftentimes lead to the procrastination, which is the big number two as far as I'm concerned.
They're super linked. And before you continue that thought, I'm going to have Jessica close out the poll. But, yes, continue that thought as we're waiting for the results to come in. Or did you want to procrastinate on answering that question?
No. It's so true. The procrastination then just becomes something that after a while I start recognizing, whoops, it must be the F, because there's a lack of commitment for me. I'm always too busy, and as far as the support, I'll go looking for it. But if I myself have decided that it's okay to allow myself to get off track or to do something that's more important as far as I'm concerned for somebody else, it means I really haven't got the commitment set for myself. So those are the ones that I put in alignment. How about you?
Yeah, well, I would have to say, and I'm not avoiding the question, just so you know, but we do have results here on the screen.
Ooh.
So let's take a look at what folks said. So we are in good company. So the number one answer, yes, the number one answer at 34% is procrastination. But you can see there really is a spread. I mean, there's almost a tie for distractions, too busy, lack of commitment. And then, there were some folks that picked other, and there were some comments in the chat panel, one individual saying that, there was a family illness, another person saying lack of buy-in from the people needed to achieve a goal. So that might be something that we can talk a little bit more about. Lack of resources. So some people had some, very legitimate reasons, but there was definitely a spread. So we're going to have the opportunity to talk about some steps that are really going to help directly and indirectly start to address some of these things. But I think Nellie is going to first start off with a definition just to level set for us.
It is important that we at least explore this. Now, this is a broad definition. When we ask ourselves what are goals, directly it's the object, literally the outcome or target of a person's ambition or effort, an aim or a desired result. Now, just look at that word desired. It's what we want. It's something that we desire. And there's often no shortage, of course, of ideas that you'll come up with for goals, but the process is what seems to break down because the goals we set might lack focus or are too big, and this can oftentimes lead to that distraction and procrastination and lack of commitment that we were just talking about. But if we can just look at some examples of where in our lives we create some goals so we can get into some specifics, I think that that'll help us see a few things.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I'm just going to make one comment. You know, it's interesting. I've seen this definition before, but all of a sudden that word desire is popping out, and it's making me think of the lack of commitment because I think sometimes we commit to goals that maybe deep down we really don't desire. They're more shoulds than wants, and then maybe the desire is missing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go into
it's a good one.
Some of the sample goals here.
Well, right off the bat, you know, when we're thinking about our work life, certainly one of the first things that might pop into mind, of course, is a career change or a promotion. It's either a change, a move, taking on more responsibility, leadership of a team, or some other types of aspirations within your workplace. It could be anything from a productivity perspective. When we think of improving on anything, more effective, faster, more efficient, more powerful, more noticeable, better at something desired, there's always something that we can look at. I was trying to figure out with the coffee pots for the longest time what it was that we were being productive with, and now I finally got it, so I love that.
I don't do anything without coffee. I don't know about you.
Thank you for that. The other one that comes up, and this one I see so often, is that a lot of times we don't think about just our communication, perhaps what influence or the type of leadership style that we're carrying off and how we might be able to do it differently, being able to handle conflict or confrontation, delegating or just managing and leading differently. A lot of times these are characteristics that we don't see that we can turn into actual goals. And last but not least, this is the one that I absolutely love, is where we're really putting ourselves out there. Now, we've got the representation of presenting or public speaking, really any smart risk developments that we want to conquer. Speaking and presenting seems to come up because it's the one that scares so many people the most. And yet it is so necessary for how we show up and how we deliver. So what we're going to do, and what I like about where we're headed, is that we're going to offer some tools and strategies that will help to keep these goals in focus. And then it helps to increase the likelihood of actually achieving them. There's other popular goals too that I'm sure people have in mind as well, with regard to wellness and things around stress and whether they're trying to do physical fitness and nutrition or maybe even that special relationship. The thing we would like us to be able to focus on here are all of the characteristics and support elements of what we can do from actually learning and growing in any one of these categories that is within our work life that actually ends up reflecting, and vice versa, in our personal life.
Right, because I would assume that, you're welcome to communicate with us in the chat panel if one of these 4 areas align with what you're focused on for your goals for this year. But, yeah, I would assume that the steps that we go over are relevant regardless of the area of life you're focused on. So whether it's professional or personal, it's sort of the same process, the same questions.
Absolutely. We're focusing more so on the professional here, but I really want you to consider it on all levels. Absolutely. There's 5 steps, the ones that we've focused on that generally and most effectively get us to the end result. Looking back and looking forward and setting goals that matter. Now, just at a high level, step 1 is to look back. It's reflecting and introspecting. The second step allows us to celebrate last year's successes. It reminds ourselves of what it is that we have in fact achieved. Every little bit counts. Step 3 is to troubleshoot the missed goals. This literally means checking into the what happened so that there's no repeats. And moving on to step 4, then it's about time to zero in on what's most important. This visualization step is about why you are actually doing all of this. And lastly, by mapping your action plan for success, this offers you the how, which is often assumed at the highest level rather than the details and the to-dos. So setting yourself up for success is what we want to make sure happens.
Yeah, and I want to just mention to David, who writes in, what he's focused on is how best to set meaningful goals and keep it down to 5. So give us a yes in the chat panel if you're with David. Let's show him some support here. How many of you set the 15 to 20 goal priority list, which, of course, we know where that ends up, right? So I think step 4 is going to be really important in terms of zeroing down and prioritizing. So thanks for sharing with us, David. All right, let's move into step 1.
Well, looking at the individual steps, and every time I think about looking back, I mean, many of us might want to look at last year and kind of say, oh, boy, that was a write-off, or all those things I might have planned I didn't get done. Yet the reality is that this kind of reflection is a critical component of setting goals that matter. It helps us really to uncover what we've fulfilled and where we may have been stuck. If right now, as an example, you're not reflecting on specific goals that you've set, think about last year. Think about highlights. What is it that actually went well? What did you achieve? And please don't overlook anything, no matter how small it might be. What were the low points? What did you want to change or improve? Where did you bump up against any challenges? And what ended up frustrating you? These are patterns, perhaps, or lack of actions that you might have considered. But either way, the low points still have to be something that, as much as we don't want to, be able to recognize that we don't want to repeat. And then consider, how do I perhaps strengthen my relationship with my boss, reduce my stress at work, maximize my network, communicate better with my colleagues or my team, or even just improve certain skills so that I can maybe get promoted or something. We always seem to have a fantasy, but without looking back and really recognizing where our reality was, it's hard for us then to make the steps to move forward.
Yeah, I think as I was thinking about this webinar, I realized it is something that I've undervalued, the reflection piece. I don't know if it's partly because, I'm always chasing shiny objects, or because things are moving so quickly, who has time to sit down and reflect. But I realize this actually can be really powerful to look back and think about. In my case, I was thinking about the things that used to scare me that don't scare me anymore. So as an example, I'm just going to come clean on this webinar. As an example, a couple years ago, it would make me very nervous, scared to speak on a webinar. It was a sort of a new medium, and now I really enjoy being able to share information in this way. So why I think that's helpful is the next time I'm looking at something that is scary, by looking back and going, okay, well, I've been there, and what allowed me to overcome that, so being willing to be uncomfortable, willing to take risks, you can apply it forward. So this is something I will say that I often skipped over step 1.
Look at this. Anyone would say you're a natural at this.
Well, thank you, Nellie. That's why we keep you around. Okay.
I love this step, and do not ever try to step around it. It's about celebrating last year's successes. Yeah, that is the second step. If you set goals for yourself in last year, just think about this. What actually did go well? What did you actually achieve? And how and why were you successful? Just take a moment and reflect on that. No matter how small of a step, as I've mentioned, you may have judged it. Remember, it was a step that moved you forward. And just as Tanya finished saying, something that seemed so scary to her yesterday is something that she's doing right now in front of us all. And this will end up serving as an important step to evaluating how you achieved some of your best results. It also gives you some clues as to what you can drive, or what can, in fact, drive your success in the year ahead. Somewhat predictive. Think about things you achieved that made you feel good. It is also important to honor what you did accomplish. That's that dopamine rush. That gives you the ability to ensure that you're not just focused on what you didn't get done, which sometimes can really have a demotivating impact. Celebrate.
And I would just add to that, for any of you on the line who are people managers, this is, I think, really important for leaders to celebrate not only your own personal goals, but the goals of your team. I say that because I remember when, I first became a people manager, and I was always looking for how could we do better, and I wouldn't stop to celebrate. And then you're not really reinforcing for people what did well, what they did do well, so they can repeat it and they can feel recognized. So it's not just for us, it's for the people around us as well.
Excellent. Well, that becomes part of our communication of it too. Excellent. Well, our third step and not to be missed again, troubleshooting those missed goals. This is that tricky one that actually says what did and didn't happen. Of course, you also need to consider what you might not have achieved that you had your sights set on. If you set goals for yourself in last year, where'd you get stuck? Troubleshoot what might have gotten in your way. There's markers you'll notice for that and what emotions came with it. There are a lot of things that quite oftentimes can be underlying to the patterns of behavior that we draw or the things that we start setting ourselves up to fail, if you will, because of thought patterns we might even have or the lack of belief that we just think it's not going to happen. But this can help to serve as a diagnosis of potential barriers or obstacles that you need to strategize ways to overcome so that it just doesn't happen again and that you can move closer to your desired results. Now, what we don't reveal, we won't heal. So we're better off to make sure that we're honest with ourselves about what it was that didn't happen so that we can really work on strategies to avoid that happening again.
That's really good. As Oprah would say, that was a tweetable moment. Can you repeat that? What we don't reveal, we don't heal.
There we go.
Oh, I love that.
Which in the opposite, what we reveal, we heal. There we go.
Yeah, and it's making me think, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier, when I first became a manager, I had a really hard time delegating. And part of it is I was viewing delegation as a way to burden others, as opposed to I had to really understand what delegation was about, and it can be a fantastic vehicle, if not the key vehicle, to developing people. So first, I think I had to reveal it, I had to recognize it, and then second, I had to get some assistance in understanding how to delegate more effectively. And thankfully, we cover that in a number of our leadership programs, so there's some really great training out there. But the first step is to, I guess, acknowledge it.
Oh, yeah, the mindset or the belief system that you have is definitely going to lead its way, yes. So the fourth step, in terms of our opportunity to zero in on what's important, I really love this step. This, as far as I'm concerned, drives everything that is the word purpose. This answers the why. Because if we create the vision, and imagine it to be real, then whatever we see, we can actually make it be. And this is often overlooked step in setting goals. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to repeat it again. It is the most important. We really have to have an idea of what the goal looks like physically. And I mean so that you could reach out and touch it or know that you've already experienced it. It's about creating an image of our future state. And then what ends up happening when you do that is that it allows us to evoke an emotional connection with it. I very strongly believe in a statement that says, see it, then you believe it, and then you'll actually see it. When I start thinking about the neuroscience of it all, and I don't want to get into the psychology necessarily as much as just appreciating the types of professionals or people like athletes and anyone who has a determined goal or an outcome, they certainly play into this. This is the conscious and subconscious connection. By creating new neural pathways with an actual picture, it elevates the focus of the goal from what you want to achieve to why you want to achieve it. It evokes an emotional connection, as I mentioned, and the goal is now powerful in achieving that behavioral change that's necessary in order to get there. So when you capture that in your mind, or even on a vision board, a lot of people like to use that tool, cutting out all kinds of pictures of what you're going to look like, actually seeing yourself doing every step of it. It's essential to your success, and it also increases the likelihood of that success. Whatever we see, as I mentioned, we can make it be. And the thing that I love, I always make sure that we keep this in mind, is that from a brain power point of view, it's amazing what we've got. Our memory of what's happened in the past, or just memory in general, and our imagination, if you can just gather this, actually occupy the same space in the brain. So when we make a decision to imagine what something can look like, we actually have the opportunity to change the neural path through these new experiences. And being aware that outcome visualization allows us to see what we're attempting to achieve. But the process visualization is the how of what we're going to achieve. So if we were a professional athlete, not only would we be looking for that Olympic gold medal and seeing ourselves stepping up onto the podium and being able to actually receive that award, but in the meantime, we have the visualization of every step of the way of what we've had to do to get up in the morning, be able to go to our trainer, do what it is that we've needed to do, and exercise every step of becoming that winner that we imagine we are. That's the possibility in zeroing in on that purpose.
Well, I have to say, number one, I'm feeling very energized and inspired by that share. Thank you. And I'm thinking this really is a really nice build from step number 3, because as you talk about the power of imagination and memory, if you're creating those celebratory moments, that I would imagine contributes to being able to imagine what success is going to look and feel like. And I want to thank Fred for his contribution in the chat panel, which I missed on step 3, where he says it's always important to spend as much time or more time celebrating as you do troubleshooting problems. There's a tendency to overemphasize failures and problems. So as you're talking about being able to taste it, feel it, visualize it, if you have a history of celebrating, whether it's yourself or with your team, you can carry that forward and start to experience it at the emotional level, which I guess is very empowering.
Absolutely. It becomes part of the body as well as the brain. It's really what's fascinating about all that. So
what would you say, Nellie, I'm going to put you on the spot with a question here that's coming to mind. So many times in the world that we live in, we have to set goals, especially in a work environment where things are changing, where because you talked about visualizing. I just created a new word. You're all free to use it. Visualizing the steps you need to get somewhere, but sometimes the steps are really, really unclear. So how do you create that if maybe you don't have as much clarity as you would like? Would you have suggestions around that?
Well, brainstorming, it's kind of like a gap analysis. We do a lot of things where, here's where we are and here's where we want to be. And there's a whole bunch of details in between that perhaps we might not really know where to start. There's people that are going to be involved, so we can ask a lot of questions in terms of what would it take for me to get here. There's also a number of resources that we can also get to in terms of how have other people done it, or, where do they go to see their successes realized. But more importantly, I think oftentimes the details and the to-dos are the things that you desire out of it. So even with that professional athlete, it's not as though because they might be a professional high jumper that all of a sudden they're going to say, well, now I want to become a long-distance runner. How do I get there? It really isn't about changing the game as much as bettering the game and knowing what it is that we want to do in order to up the game. And so asking and being able to be open to what it is that you have and that you don't have set for yourself now, never be afraid to ask for the assistance.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You're reminding me of a phrase that I heard that I really like is sometimes all you can do and all you need to do is the next right step.
One at a time.
Right. So,
well, which is interesting because this last step, mapping your action plan for success. I like referring to this as the GPS to success. I mean, we all, no longer are we pulling out the maps. We're now being told how to do it. Well, let's tell ourselves, because this literally becomes the need to prioritize and plan. It's easy to get overly ambitious when reimagining what's possible in our lives. It is, however, important to make sure to set yourself up for success. So what's it going to take for you to achieve it? And that means spending a couple of minutes with where are you now? Like, where do you want to be? And actually brainstorming what needs to happen in between. The devil is in the details. And when we haven't looked at it from a very detailed perspective, it's going to bite us. That's all that's going to happen. It's the key to identifying those specifics of what needs to get done. And it's also important that as we identify the specifics, we look for them as things that can actually be SMART goals. Now, I know, Tanya, you've probably heard that term used as an acronym, and that's exactly what we're using it as today, because it's the ability each time that we write down a specific detail or each time that we're going to consider something that has to happen, we want to make sure that we're very specific with it. When it's broad or when it's general or when we just, again, go back to, well, I'm going to get there, without anything that actually has been defined clearly, it'll be a lot more difficult. The measurable element of it in the acronym of SMART, S for specific, M for measurable, is that if we don't know the definition of what it is that we're actually trying to achieve, we won't know when we have, in fact, gotten there. It needs to have the target mark, and it needs to be something that we've put some element around as far as, yes, achievable. I know that people enjoy dreaming, and I really have seen many people, unfortunately, put themselves in positions where this is what they want because they think it's what they should have. And yet the unfortunate reality is that for them it just might not be achievable right now. And, trying to exercise something that perhaps we don't have the credentials for, or looking to achieve a promotion or to work within a job area where we have had no experience, the achievable portion of it has to be realistic for us. And notice that the R for relevant is what we've chosen to use, although quite often it is realistic there as well. This is where, again, check into the careful or about the shoulds. The relevance has to apply to you. It's got to be, if you remember what we said about a goal is something that we desire. So be very careful that this isn't relevant to someone else's desire or relevant to what you've seen as an exercise or an achievement, but instead that it's something that truly is relevant for you, your advancement, and your peace. And likewise, time-bound. Yeah, this is where I get myself quite oftentimes too as far as scheduling. Time-bound means that we've really got to be able to give it a deadline. We've got to be able to give it a deadline so that we do put the specific actions into place. A plan of action could be month by month. A plan of action for many people could be what they do at the end of the day by writing their to-dos for the absolute next day. Whatever way it works best for you, it's important that there is simply an element of what you can look at as the picture of where you are now to where you want to go. And this is an element of achieving beyond, well, you know what, all of a sudden I got myself a little tripped up here because I'm just thinking about the opportunity in my own plan. As I start my new calendar for the year, and we're all very excited about writing in a million different to-dos, and it seems like my January quite often has the most to-dos in it, and by the time it moves to February and March, I've started dotting off because I start figuring that these things aren't being achieved. And I know that for a fact, it's that I didn't make them specific enough. So oftentimes, and I'm going to even offer this to you, there can be an opportunity to get an accountability factor going. And that means either making a declaration about it, involving other people, having a potential coach, or maybe someone that you can check in with monthly, like a colleague, giving yourself the opportunity to celebrate small wins or progress, and if anything, just helping you to shut out those distractions and allowing yourself to be unapologetic about your focus. It truly, truly is about taking care of yourself first.
Yes, and the accountability factor is huge. I'd love to ask our audience, how many of you actually share your goals with other people? Speak them out loud. I mean, obviously some of you would be sharing them with your manager if these are work goals, but how many of you sort of declare them, to use Nellie's word? And, the reason I'm asking is I recognize in myself a lot of times I don't, if I even manage to write them down, I'm already making progress, but I often don't share them. I think there is that fear that on top of whatever disappointment I might experience if I don't meet it, that I'm going to disappoint someone else, and so things get in the way. But here's the thing. It's you're really missing out on a key strategy for success, because I don't know how many of you on the line know, just a few years ago, a study was done by the Association for Talent Development, ATD, and they found that if you actually share your goal with someone else, like you verbalize it to someone else, it increases your chances of success by 65%. But here's where it got even more interesting, okay? But that already starts to show the power of accountability. But the research suggested that you can boost your chances of success up to 95% if you have a specific accountability appointment with a person to whom you've made a commitment. So I might say to Nellie, okay, you know, I'm making a commitment. I'm going to, you know, get in shape, and I'm going to exercise every day, for example. And then the second step, the really important one, is, okay, a week from now, Thursday, I'm going to call you, I'm going to email you, we'll meet for coffee or whatever, and I'm going to be accountable to you as to whether I did it. And just that act of knowing you're going to have to, because here's the thing, it's really interesting, right? I don't know if this is a common thing for everyone, but I have a much easier time keeping a commitment to someone else than I do to keeping it to myself. So if I say to someone, I'm going to show up and do this, or I know somebody's going to hold me to account, and maybe that's why the research shows what it shows.
Well, I love that the statistics reinforce it, because when I was mentioning to you to put yourself first, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And when you do that and make a declaration and you allow others to actually support, drive, check in on you with that, you've actually put yourself first. It's you're investing in yourself by putting it out there to other people. And I think that's a fantastic way of doing it.
You know, you used an interesting word. You said you invite people to support you. So I guess the caveat here would be careful who you share it with. Because, well, I mean, realistically, you don't want to share it with people who go, you're dreaming. You know what I mean? Like that's not realistic. So, I mean, well, you could use that feedback as a check-in as to, is it realistic? But maybe you want those people who are going, you know, see the potential and have your back and are going to ask you about it. And you can invite them, I guess, to say, hey, ask me about how I'm doing on this, so you build in that accountability.
You do definitely want encouragement and support. You don't want the criticism. And thus, if one of the things that I want to make sure, and you know, look at that lonely cloud in the sky, and yet the reality is, look how clear it is at the same time, is to get clear about what you want. Shutting down that inner critic is incredibly important. You've got to have clarity on the emotional association with what it is that you're trying to achieve. Refining your goals starts by getting clear with that. When you leverage the 5 steps that actually help you answer that why and helps you to build a plan that is going to get you there, this is an amazing thing. It becomes a cycle that you can continue each month or each week or each, 3 weeks, to keep your goal fresh and flexible. Now, the scale of it is that ensure that you've got time built in for life to happen, of course. This is where people get really down on themselves. Yes, I'm living in a world with aging parents and definitely all kinds of changes that might happen, or the suddenness of life that just takes its course. And this isn't when all of a sudden we say, damn, look what happened. My whole life is turned upside down and now I'm not going to be achieving. No, it's being able to face the reality and recognizing where you are and where life is still going to do what it's going to do. But that doesn't mean that we can't get realistic about what it's going to take to actually achieve those goals. So try to quiet that inner critic voice inside your head. And instead, just keep reminding yourself that not only are you perfect exactly as you are, but on top of it, it is not perfection that you are looking for. With that kind of clarity, you can begin to take action. It involves expanding a lot of things, including maybe even some of our skill sets.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting when you say that, because I guess it's a delicate dance between remaining committed but also flexible, because there were some folks in the chat panel saying, you know, you may be reliant upon other people to achieve your goal. So you can remain committed and clear and holding the vision, but recognizing that stuff is going to happen and you may have to readjust as you go along.
Well, isn't that the truth? Because I'll tell you this much. When it comes to the goals that we set related to our workplace, we do have to factor in that there's often a need for either something that we're not doing so well right now, a skill that others have, or something that we recognize that we'd like to do better, that maybe is just to expand our mindset or enable certain capabilities, or I'll tell you one that's a biggie because it initiates everything is building our confidence. So the skill developments we've listed here in terms of maximizing productivity or aligning and influencing for success, the communication, big bang, let me tell you, improving relationships at work, whether it's with our colleagues or with our boss, there's always something that we want. We spend so much time. When I look at the reality of where it is that we actually engage most of our life, our workplace needs to be somewhere where not only we are productive, but we're also at peace and happy. And so if we can have those relationships at work actually work for us, then that gives us a real sense of satisfaction. And lastly, if we're the ones responsible in terms of how it is that we want to lead others and create results, then what kind of person do we want to be in that? What type of a leader, a communicator, what kind of a reporter, what kind of a supporter do we want to be? And this is where I feel so comfortable, and I don't mean to, start doing a commercial here, but the reality is that I love being partnered myself with CMC because I know that they spend a great deal of time actually partnered with their own individuals and organizations across the country to support with this. I know, Tanya, that you, as an example, and the team at CMC, I mean, every time we talk about things like this, I know that you've worked to align a variety of different offerings to the most common goal categories we see in our work. It's never out of date, and this is why I love being part of this organization. Okay, enough about that.
So, we did not pay her to say that.
Okay,
Thank
never
you,
mind,
Nellie.
never mind.
Well, we do spend a lot of time thinking about it and listening to our customers, and these categories represent some of the most common areas that people are focused. But to make it personal to those of you on the line, I'd love to ask you a final poll question here which of these goal categories are you focused on? Is there one that stands out for you? So make your selection. Is it around productivity? Is it more around influencing, being strategic? Is it about relationships or leading? And, of course, they're all interconnected, but are you able to be specific? Is there one that stands out for you? And then, of course, don't forget to hit the submit button. If you could close out the poll for us, Jessica. I know for me, one of the big ones would be improving relationships at work. It's the whole communication and creating a feedback culture and collaboration, because it just seems that more and more, it's always been the case that we needed to collaborate for results, but I think we're just seeing an expansion of that. So that's
it's the big thing about the balance as well. We want relationships to be positive, and yet we also know we have to get things done. And quite often, whether it's in the leadership role or whether it's in a support role, we do have a lot of difficulties with the communication of that. And then the balancing act is, with regard to how am I behaving as a brand of a leader and how am I behaving as a brand of a supporter. And yet there's so many skill sets that go within that cover the elements of confidence, cover the elements of influencing, cover the elements of collaboration and team development. So there's so much. But within those categories, I think you've pretty much captured all of them that might have subsets. And I'd love to see what people are saying about that.
Well, the results are in. And leading by only 1% is the aligning and influencing for success category at 39%. Then we've got maximizing productivity right behind it, followed by improving work relationships, and then leading for results. So I'm just going to remind everyone that shortly we're going to be going into the Q&A section. So this is your opportunity to ask questions. Where do you get stuck? This is an opportunity to have a conversation with Nellie and have her give you some feedback. But before we get there, we wanted to offer to you some of the courses that we at CMC have aligned to these categories. Now, this is just a sample. It's not all of them. So in the category of maximizing productivity, we have courses such as Extraordinary Productivity, the 5 choices that drive success, and the 7 habits of highly effective people, both of which are Franklin Covey programs. We've got under the aligning and influencing, so this was the number 1 category you told us. We've got developing a strategic mindset, getting results without authority. We have other courses not listed, such as negotiating to win, We've got courses like Responding to Conflict, Leading with Emotional Intelligence. We have one on the art of critical conversations, rather. And finally, in the Leading for Results, we've got quite a few courses as well. Coaching is one of them, management skills for new supervisors and managers. We have a ton more. So please, if this is something that you're looking on working on, visit our website or give us a call. The number is on the screen. You can visit us at www.cmcoutperform.com. And now we're going to segue to the Q&A panel. Not the Q&A panel, but the Q&A section, which I'm going to check the Q&A panel. All righty here. And we have a question here from Susan. And she says, I've been procrastinating on my goal. Well, she's hard on herself. It's only January 14th. Well, I'm assuming she started this at the beginning of the year, so I shouldn't. But she's been procrastinating on her goal. Do you have any suggestions? So, Nellie, what would you say to Susan?
Ooh, that procrastination word. So, Susan, remember the steps that we were talking about earlier, and the second one with regard to our ability, where am I here? I'm sorry, to celebrate last year's successes and troubleshoot missed goals. Well, what I want you to consider is, with anything and everything, regardless of whether it was last year or it was a long time ago, give yourself the credit of where it is that you are right now and what it took you to get here. So start with the big pat on the back, if you don't mind me saying. And then when you consider how it might look and feel to actually have already achieved what you're procrastinating over, touch it. Just really, really taste it. Have it be already done in your mind. And just sit and resonate with that for a second. The other part is some self-accountability structures. You might have certain things that might ping and pong and encourage. A lot of tech lovers love the apps for commitment and some encouragements and some empowerment words, the things that just keep you going. A lot of times if it's a wake-up alarm for us just to be on time, that's one element of our life. So there's other things that we can do that could be alarms to remind us to stay motivated and to stay focused and take advantage of everything you've got, whether it's technology-oriented or the good people around you.
Thank you for that, Nellie. We have questions coming in, and some of them are some real doozies.
Oh, boy.
So Rita asks, how can you overcome your fear of failure?
Well, interesting. Fear of failure can oftentimes be attached to what we believe is a bit of perfectionism or what has to be absolute in terms of an outcome. Remember when I said life happens and things can just change along the way? It's really fascinating that when you're going towards something, you know, if you've ever imagined being on a fantastic vacation and you have a really specific area or place that you want to get to, but you know what may happen is as you're actually driving along that route and you know where your end destination is, something might sidetrack you that is important enough and yet attractive enough that in that moment you may feel, no, stay on target, and yet the reality is this could in fact be exactly what you need in order to then have you enjoy the rest of the distance that you have to go. So, block?
Yeah, I think that's very true. And I would add one other thing. I think part of the challenge is that we see fear as the enemy. You know, we're neurologically wired for fear. It keeps us safe. And I think that's why there are books out there that are, you know, such as Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Okay, clearly we're fans of that one. And it's to recognize, thank you, fear, for talking to us. And but it's moving forward despite the fear. And that goes back to some of the things you said in terms of getting support. And don't necessarily make the fear a big deal. You can still take that step forward and recognize that your worth, your value is not the end result of whatever this thing is. And by the way, the sad news and the good news is it's part of the process of success. If you look at the most successful people, they will tell you the number of times they failed. And I would say if you're not failing, you're
Absolutely.
not trying, anything that's pushing you out of your comfort zone. And
sometimes fear can even be somewhat of a motivator in that there could be things that you're doing as well. And I know a lot of professionals that can match me on this one, that in spite of the fact that we do it, it doesn't mean that we know we're not fearing it. It's that we do still feel what we feel, but rather than overcoming it, it's just doing it regardless, just getting through that point. So fear is something that is going to be a natural element and not an enemy.
Absolutely. And I'm going to just make a shameless plug here for CMC. One of the cool things about our courses is that when it comes to our programs, we try to build in a lot of time to practice. So this is a great place to fail not publicly in a safe environment. So obviously you can't, it's not a learning lab for every goal you might have out there, but if you have goals, especially around leadership coaching, being more strategic, presenting, stuff like that, like try it on in one of our classrooms where you have people that are not there to criticize, that are there to support. But I'm going to move on beyond this. I'm just going to name the book again because Heron asked, what was that book? It's Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's an old book, but it's a classic. It's kind of timeless. Oh, here's a tough one. So Karen asks, what if you're working through conflicts of your goal and the organization's goal for you? So it sounds like Karen wants to achieve one thing, but her company has another thing in mind.
Interesting. It really boils down to making sure that in some way we're matched with what the organization's values are. I mean, a lot of times we might be seeing ourselves heading in a particular direction, and yet the organization might not see that as being valuable or productive in terms of what it is that we might be contributing. It's important to be aligned, and by being aligned, you're not an island. So in other words, when we are part of an organization, it is about, are we looking to engage ourselves and grow and alter what it is that we're doing for ourselves within this organization, or are we looking to professionalize as we do what we do with the organization, aligning yourself with the goals of the company, but also aligning yourself with the values and making sure that you're having open conversations about whether or not you're headed in the right direction. That's important with your own leaders, with your colleagues, and certainly with understanding what the future of your organization is about.
Yeah, and it goes back to that desired state. So imagine if you don't have that alignment, then how sustainable will it be if you're not aligned there? But there may be other ways to achieve, I don't have a lot of details on Karen's question, but if, for example, she was vying for a certain title, but the organization sees her in a different role,
right.
Maybe there are certain skill sets that she would learn regardless of where, she wants versus the organization. So maybe there are compromises. There are ways to still achieve some of those learning goals, some of those professional goals, but in a way she might not have considered. There may be a third idea, your idea, the organization's idea, and then maybe you come up with a third idea. So,
and to create opportunities as well that might not have been considered. That's part of it. The more confident we become, the more skilled we become, the more capable we are of the offerings and the contributions we can make.
Absolutely. Very final question, and if there are questions that you have, please enter them. If we don't get to them, we can provide some answers in a follow-up email that you're going to receive. We're going to be sending out a thank you email with the recording. So Lawrence seems to be facing time as being his biggest enemy, and on top of that, some health concerns that are getting in the way. So what do you do when you're I think a lot of us feel that we're overwhelmed, overworked, stressed for time, and then, health is a whole other thing. But when you have coaching clients, for example, Nellie, that come to you, or folks in our classrooms that are saying, I just don't have time to do this, where do you start?
Time. Everybody has the exact same amount of time. We've got 24 hours in a day. I want us to stay focused on what we can control. What you can control is being good to yourself versus what we can't control. And through that, it means to allow yourself to be good to yourself. So when I hear somebody say that, when you've got health concerns and yet you're trying to achieve a particular goal, it's not about one being the priority over the other. Without your health, there isn't going to be a goal achieved. So our ability to really being good to ourselves and to recognize and talk with ourselves positively, that is at least on the emotional element for us making sure that we prioritize what is most important in our own individual lives. not what we're comparing to anybody else. But then when it comes to the time factor of it, actually break it down. I know this sounds very logistical now, but literally breaking it down from the number of hours that you know you want to give yourself to sleep, right up to the number of hours that you want to spend in terms of good communication and conversations that move you forward. And as well, it's about the uptime of learning and the downtime of just being good to yourself. It's important. Every hour has a value, and every minute is going to make a difference. So do start by looking in the mirror and saying, I am number one, and how I manage my time is what's most important to me. Don't allow anyone else to actually be the one to prioritize that.
I love that. And when you said break it down, it reminds me of an exercise that I did once where I had to, it's painful. I wrote down how I use virtually every minute or every 5 minutes in a day, and it's sobering. It's sobering because the amount of time that gets wasted on things that don't align to your priorities. So first start with the priorities and then start to look. Be really brutally honest. Like that time you spent on Facebook, was that really supporting your health goal or your work goal? You know, it's like you have to get honest. We have some questions. We'd love to answer them in a follow-up email, but I need to move on. I want to remind everyone that you should visit our website and check out our free resources. We got a lot of good stuff in there, articles and recordings of webinars like this and other things. So please, cmcoutperform.com. Finally, any of you on the line who are looking for PDUs, we are an accredited, a global registered education provider with PMI. So this is the information that you need to get your credit. I will show it again at the end in case you didn't have time to write it down. But with that, I want to respect your time and wrap up on time. I am just so grateful to you, Nellie, for sharing your insights with us today and having this conversation. I'm thankful for all of you, and I want to say congratulations to all of you for showing up, because this is really the first step in expressing your commitment to what you're up to, and we would love to continue to support us. So feel free to reach out, call us, check out our website. We are here, and we have a lot of great tools and courses to support you in this new year. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your day.